Hey everybody, how's it going? It is Tim, and I hope you are having a great, safe, and happy holiday season. We're going to go over a few of the tools that we use putting together our Great Western building, so stay tuned. Alright, so we're going to go over a few of the tools that we used for our building. Your results may vary based on, of course, the size of your building specifically. But for us, first and foremost, we had a telehandler for offloading all of the parts from the semi when it arrived, as well as moving them around the work site and helping to fly in the columns and the roof when we did the main erection of the heavy steel. On top of that, we had a couple of man lifts. We had a scissor lift and a boom lift. We use those extensively for moving folks around up high for the purlins, the girts, the sheeting, the trim work. Those three items were pretty much instrumental in being able to actually put our building up. Depending on the size of your building, your results may vary. If you've got a smaller building, sometimes you can get by with a manual lift for raising up your purlins and girts. Maybe a loader tractor or even a skid steer might work if you've got a considerably smaller building, or at least something with shorter sidewalls. Our building with the 16-foot sidewalls definitely called for something with a great reach on it. All right, so on to the other tools. Besides the big machinery, there's your common stuff, your tape measures that you're going to need. That's just kind of a given. Smaller hand tools. But some of the items that we use specifically for our building was one of the key items was the Milwaukee M12 Rivet Gun, and this we used for all of the rivets. There are about 1,000 of them in our building, and I really didn't want to do it all by hand, so I picked this up on Amazon. It was about $300, maybe a little bit less, for the combination package that came with 2 batteries and the gun. And charger, of course. You can get just the bare tool for considerably less if you have some other M12 gear already, but pretty much the rivet goes in the end. Pull the trigger, it gets set, release, and you're done. Very easy, very quick process. I think I probably went through 3 battery cycles with all the rivets in the building, so very efficient, very handy tool. All right, another key tool was the impact driver. I just happen to have a bunch of DeWalt stuff, so that's what we used. Some of the older 18-volt series. And while some other drills were out here too, impact drivers, I found the DeWalt seemed to do the best. The other brands seemed to be a little rougher on the screws, rounded off the heads a little bit, and a lot more paint was knocked off those screw heads. So in a lot of cases, I went and backed off those screws and put in new screws with a DeWalt gun, so we didn't have a lot of exposed screw itself without paint on it. It looks a little better and more prone to resisting rust. But again, that impact driver, no matter what your brand, again, is critical. I think we had around 10,000 screws spec'd out for our building around there somewhere, so definitely a lot of work. Another very simple but important tool is the levels. We had a couple different ones, your basic torpedo level, and then I also had a large 6-foot plus level as well. So we used this big one here for setting up the columns, the big heavy columns, to get those leveled, and the smaller torpedo level here I used extensively on all the sheeting, and many other places, just to make sure everything was level, whether it was just checking to make sure trim was level, the wainscot panels, or making sure that the taller end wall panels were square and plumb. So these are inexpensive. You can get really expensive ones. This is probably a $10 one from the home store, and the other one was $5 at a swap meet years ago. So you don't need tons of expensive tools to get this job done. Many of these you probably have laying around at home, or can have access to borrow them from friends or family. One of the items I did not have was the laser levels. So you can use an old analog transit, like an old viewfinder or whatever, if you want. I went ahead and got this just so I can use it for future jobs, in addition to running a level around to check the concrete foundation to make sure everything was level. We didn't have to shim or grind anything down. This model can also be laid on its side for doing things like walls. So in the future, when we go ahead and put in our center split wall, our tack room, loft, whatnot, we'll be able to use this again in the future. And this was a Johnson level. It was about, I think about $400 for the package. It came with the level, the tripod, the big old measuring stick as well. And this thing here is also really nice because this is the pair to the level itself. So when you set up your level in the middle of your building, turn it on, it's going to shoot that line around in a circle around your building. And you walk around with this, and once you power it on, it looks for that line to come in. And when you're level, it'll beep at you. Otherwise, it'll give you an indicator if you're above or below. So this will help you get your measurements you need to make sure that your building is starting off level. In our case, we were, I think, off by 1/8 of an inch from end to end, so we really needed to do almost zero shimming anywhere on the building, so that was a real plus. Another very important tool is the angle grinder. This is just a cheapie from Harbor Freight. You don't need anything special here. We use this quite a bit for the base angle steel, as well as the rake angle steel. It goes in between the purlins for you can screw your end wall sheeting into. This also worked for the sheeting itself to cut in across diagonals, the top, or pretty much anywhere where you had to have a cut. The other option you could use on a lot of the paneling would be a Sawzall. I have one of those. I just didn't think of it until we were nearly done with the project. So that is also a option if you have that handy. Also for cutting, I went out ahead and got this nibbler. It's a pneumatic nibbler. It's about, I don't know, $35, $40. They do have electric models that are more expensive and air models that are more expensive as well. But I use this for the end wall sheeting. We had a notch out around where the purlins sat in. So this was able to get around the big heavier ribs of the sheeting where I couldn't get in with the tin snips. And next on the list is the tin snips. There's a number of different options for those. You have straight cuts, angle cuts, and I did start out with some of the old straight cut options and ended up going out to the home store and picking up the angled cutters. They just seem to work a lot better getting in the trim and the panels, especially with the ribbing. You do have a left and a right and a straight cut for these. They make them in the 45 and I believe a 60 or 90 degree angle as well too. So I just picked up these because they were handy and available. Another item we have is the spud wrench. This was pretty handy for getting the holes lined up when you're threading in your nuts and bolts for your purlins or girts or flying in your roof rafters or roof beams and to get those mated up to your columns for your walls. Basically, you could just poke this through one of the holes on the upright column and then line up with the roof beam being flown in. Set that in place, and then that allows you to get one or more of your nuts and bolts in place and get everything secured. These, again, are pretty inexpensive. Pick them up locally on Amazon, wherever. And again, along with the spud wrench, we had a number of crescent wrenches. A lot of the hardware, the bolts and such, were 1.5 inches. I think 1 7/8 inches was probably one of the larger bolts that we had to work with. Otherwise, these just come in really handy. All right, one of the other specialty items that we had that I picked up was a deep impact socket, and I put that on about 18 inches of extensions on my 1/2 inch driver gun for setting all of the nuts and washers on our framed openings. Because we did have that stem wall, we weren't able to get in there just with your standard little impact gun or a wrench or anything once the framed openings were in place. So we did have to go ahead and get that deeper socket along with those extensions. Again, it's a minimal expense, probably $35 for both the socket and extensions. So, and again, many of these tools you may already have. You may have friends or family that have them too. So before you go out and buy a bunch of tools, certainly check around. All right, so two other items that were pretty instrumental in kind of the finish of the building. A is a good set of drill bits. I picked up these Bosch bits, the Cobalt bits, earlier this year for a different project, and I was very happy with how they performed. So when it came time to putting up the building, I went out and bought a bunch of the, I think it was 3/16 and 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, something like that, for all the trim pre-drilling for the rivets, and then for the sheeting itself. I found that having a nice sharp drill bit combined with punching in where all of your holes are on your sheeting turns out a very nice product. If you use cheap bits, dull bits, they will tend to dance around on your panel quite a bit and scratch them up, so you have a less than pretty looking panel when you're done. Ask me how I know about that from prior projects. But you know, punch, that's a cheap tool you can get. The drill bits, I think, were between $2 and $3 a piece, and I probably went through maybe a total of 10 drill bits for everything. A couple of them I ended up running into concrete when putting in the base angle steel, so that dulls them up pretty quick. Of course, they're not made for masonry, but by and large, those Cobalt bits, I think across the board, brand name not relevant, they'll be a good option for you for doing all of your pre-drilling, and just helps to come out with a better finished product. Another item that we used for making all of our anchor bolts, well, first was that angle grinder, came in very handy. And secondly was just a basic welder. If you have access to one, can borrow one, have a friend that has a welder, just to tack on those heavy nuts to your threaded rod. I've just got a basic flux core wire feed. You probably use a stick weld if you need to. Just something to get those two things tacked together. All right, I think that's about it for the common tools that we used for our building. Again, a lot of these tools you might already have, or you've got friends or family you could borrow from. I know a couple of these things, like the Rivet Gun, I will use for other projects down the road. The Johnson level I will also use for other projects, and I know I've got other friends that will be putting up buildings or needing projects, so you know, I'll let them borrow that, and if I get a case of beer in return, bottle of rum, great. If not, no big deal. But it's going off to help somebody else as well. If you liked this and thought it was valuable for maybe planning for your building, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe below if you have not yet. Share it with your friends. And again, I hope you guys have had a great holiday season, and here's best wishes for a great start to 2021. Thanks, and see you in the next video.